I think the scale of the problem is the reason people begin to do the work to start with. And when we get into the day-to-day, we get really focused on the incremental goals, which is completely appropriate. It's moments when you think about what's next. Scale is really important, but I would argue that thinking at the systems level is equally, if not more important, so that your efforts and your work can be driven towards having a lasting impact. You start to see where you are on the path to achieving impact at the scale of the problem and really start working towards more of a systems change approach.
Okay, so let's sketch out the problem space. Draw a box, label the left-hand axis scale from 0 to 100%, and then the bottom axis as sustainability, 0 to 100%. Now, a completely scalable solution to, say, hunger might be feeding everyone on the planet for a day. It's not sustainable because the next day the people that were hungry are hungry again. So what about feeding one person who was hungry forever? That's sustainable, but not scalable. We want to find a completely sustainable, completely scalable solution to the problem you're working in. That top right, absolute sustainability and scale, defines our problem space. But let's start where you are now with your current work and give it a number, say 1,000 people fed. This little box defines your current impact. Now look to your vision and draw a second star that shows what it would be like if you achieved that vision. So 1 million people fed. The box that star defines is your impact potential. The last chunk of space is the rest of the system. This is the total scale of the global problem. So let's put a number on that top right-hand star. For hunger, there is 842 million people who don't have enough to eat. As you probably guessed, the numbers in this little sketch aren't to scale. Let me show you what this looks like if we make these numbers to scale. So on the scale of nearly 1 billion people, our vision becomes a tiny number. You can barely see it, which is why this graph isn't to scale. It's just a way of getting your head around how what you currently do is important but tiny. Your vision is even more important and still tiny in the scope of the total addressable problem.
So now that you have a sense of what systems change is, let's see how we can apply it to your work. So get out your piece of paper and we're going to start to define how big the problem is. So what is the size of the problem that you're operating in, the total addressable scale of the problem? How many people? Is in the case of Vision Spring, 2.4 billion people are suffering from poor eyesight today. That's preventing them from employment, from school, and actually progressing in their lives. Then think about your work today and where are you today in terms of the impact that you're having, and write down that number on that first star. Then think more long term. In the long term, where do you think your work can take you? And this becomes the second star, the number that you would put down on the second star. And this becomes the potential total size of the impact that you can have as an organization operating in your current mode. Take a minute to reflect on that difference between that second star and the third outer star. How does that make you feel? In every single case of every organization that we've worked with, it's orders of magnitude higher if you think about getting to that outer star. And millions, hundreds of millions of people often is the case. Often that outer star is a number that's just incomprehensible to people. 2.4 billion, we're talking about billions of people. That's unfathomable in the construct often of our own work. But it's important to anchor on what that number is so that we can start to figure out, well, how do we fit and starting to impact even 100 people's lives that are in dealing with the same situation that all these 2.4 billion people are dealing with, for example. And if we're doing this right, and if the scale of the problem is as large as most of these challenges are, those numbers are going to be scary. And that's okay. So with Vision Spring, their stars are 3 to 5 million people who they've been able to reach to date, and they believe they can get upwards to 5 to 10 million people in the long term. But they look at that 2.4 billion number, and they've asked themselves, they've first recognized that that's important to them, that they want to actually be working towards that number, and they've realized the only way they can do that is, well, so they've asked themselves, is it enough to just stay within the second star? And for some people, the answer might be yes. But for Vision Spring, the answer was no, at least for the leadership. So the scale of the problem is really just the size of the problem. How big is the space in which we're operating in, and how big is the reality of the number of people who are suffering from that, status quo today? To do this properly, you really need to know what your current impact is and what your current impact or your potential impact could be, as well as the scale of the problem. So if you don't have these pieces, try to estimate and guess as best as you can, because you'll still get value out of the exercise. But hopefully that's an opportunity to reflect on the importance of, it's really important for us to be able to know these numbers so that we know where we're going. If we don't know where we are, we can't know where we're going, and then we won't be able to figure out how to get there. Reflect on the full scale of the problem you're trying to solve. And this may require research. If you don't already know what the scale of the problem is in terms of the number of people impacted, take a second or take some time to review what that could be and research it. If you know it, put it down here on the box. Yeah, and one challenge here is if that you're not clear on your own mission or vision, or if you don't have the ability to know, where you are today and where your reach could be in the next, 5 to 10 years, this exercise might be difficult to do. So it's important to know what your mission and vision is so that you can understand, where you are today. In every case, that outer star is going to be something that's not achievable in terms of size for your organization alone. And one thing, though, that this can prompt is thinking about, are you thinking too narrowly within your organization? So reflecting on this, you might be satisfied and happy with your target of changing the lives of 10,000 people or 1 million people. And those are huge numbers. Those are still that many people's lives whose lives are being changed. And if that is the goal, then you know that and you're comfortable with it, you can stay there. If that's not enough for you and you want to think about having a bigger impact than that, then think about, what is the broader, potential scale for you? Is it moving to another country? Is it moving to another state? Is it thinking about global expansion? Or is it thinking about, working with other players in that system towards getting closer to that outer star? When you reflect on this exercise, your mission doesn't necessarily change as a result of this, but your approach to achieving progress against that mission may change. If you're at an earlier stage as an organization, think about what your potential could be in the next 3 to 5 years and plot that on the first or second star. Either will do, but the more important piece here is to compare that number with the number of the scale of the problem, so that outer star. Your mission should help you think about and be able to then understand the size of that outer star. If it's helping people see better, for example, we want to understand how many people can't see well today and who are in that condition. But your vision should help you think about 1 or 2 of those stars, ideally that second star, and should help you understand what the potential is and what you think you could achieve in the near term and long term. If you don't have impact numbers, we're not going to be able to do this or have a sense of what your impact could be. It's going to be a tougher exercise to do. I think the most important thing is actually having a mission and vision to reflect on. Cool. Yeah, so once we've now plotted your impact numbers on this chart, take a second and think about what is the impact of your work to the broader ecosystem. What changes as a result of the work that you're doing? For the long term. Does your mission and vision reflect those changes? So you're thinking about systems change is really thinking about working beyond that second star. And now that you have a better understanding, hopefully, of what systems change is, think about how your work actually creates change that's going to be lasting. So how is your work going to be changing that system? Does your mission and vision reflect that? And if not, write down, what that difference is. In this exercise, let's also reserve judgment on if your second star or first star are big enough numbers. It's more important to know where you are as an organization so that you can start to understand where you might want to go and if those numbers are satisfying to you. And in some cases, those numbers might be just fine. And that's okay. But without understanding where we're headed and what your targets are, it becomes difficult to know how far you should actually push. Having an estimate is fine, but make sure you have a number here for this exercise. Yeah. For me, one way to think about what systems change is and how it's different from organizational scale is that your organization may grow to thousands of people or 1 million people, but if you really want to work at the scale of the problem, which can be, or the size of the problem, there are often huge jumps in terms of numbers that need to be reached, in terms of people that need to be impacted. And systems change is really working at that broader scale, size of the problem, and doing so in a way that's working with others. So other partners, other organizations that are replicating your model, that are working in partnership with you to start to change the system for the long term.